What you're about to hear is a story that turned everything upside down for one of the world's most recognizable philanthropists. When Jimmy Donaldson, the man known as MrBeast, landed in Burkina Faso with cameras, drones, and millions in aid, he believed he knew what Africa needed, but he didn't. What happened next, in the dusty heart of West Africa, would shake his faith in charity, challenge his sense of purpose, and force him to rethink what it really means to help. Because this time, it wasn't about what he could give. It was about what he still had to learn. And the most unexpected twist? The transformation wasn't going to happen to the people MrBeast came to help. It was going to happen to him. By the end of this story, you might never look at charity the same way again. The white trucks rolled in at dawn, stirring up thick clouds of red dust as they moved through the streets of Ouagadougou. Engines rumbled as the city slowly came to life. Roosters crowed in alleyways. Street vendors unpacked their wares. Children in worn backpacks raced toward school. For days, the whispers had spread through phones, radios, markets, and mosques. MrBeast is here. Jimmy stepped out of the lead vehicle just as the rising sun set the sky ablaze in orange and gold. He smiled, that familiar, camera-ready smile, as he scanned the crowd beginning to gather. You could feel it in the air, that pulse of energy before a big moment. His team of 23 moved quickly around him. Cameramen, tech crew, security, coordinators, professionals who had done this dozens of times across the world. But this place felt different. Even the air felt heavier, as if it knew something was about to happen. "This is incredible," Jimmy said to Marcus, his lead cameraman, nodding toward the gathering crowd. "Look at all these people. We're about to change lives. This could be the biggest video we've ever made." Marcus adjusted his lens. "Light's perfect. Let's get our opening shots before the sun moves." From the side, Sarah, the logistics lead, walked up, clipboard in hand, face a mix of excitement and pressure. "Jimmy, everything cleared customs. 200 water purifiers, 500 solar panel kits, 3 tons of medical supplies, materials for 15 schools, food for 2,000 families for 3 months. Every item cataloged, every location mapped." Her eyes gleamed. This was her art form, making the chaos flow. Jimmy nodded, heart swelling. This is what he lived for. That moment when resources met real need and everything lined up to create impact. He had built an empire on spectacle and generosity, but underneath it all, what kept him going was this: the chance to change lives, to be the reason a child has clean water or a light to study under. The crowd thickened. People streamed in from every direction. Barefoot children chased the convoy. Mothers balanced infants on their hips, pointing toward the white trucks. Old men sat in shaded corners watching quietly, like they'd seen many promises come and go. "MrBeast! MrBeast!" The chant rose, English mixing with French and local languages in a chorus of hope. Amadou, the local interpreter, stepped forward. He had been recommended by the embassy, a seasoned voice who understood the pulse of the people. He raised his voice and spoke to the crowd in French, calm, clear, warm. As he spoke, Jimmy watched faces light up. Smiles spread, eyes widened, hands clapped in disbelief. "They know," Amadou said, turning back to Jimmy. "I told them. The water, the solar panels, the medicine, the books, they are grateful. Very, very grateful." And just like that, Jimmy felt it. That familiar surge of meaning, of purpose. The dopamine rush of doing good. This was why he started in the first place, not for clicks or cash, but for this exact feeling, a real difference, made real fast. He stepped forward, ready to speak. But then, something changed. The energy didn't die. It shifted. Quieter now. More solemn, more expectant. Heads turned, feet shuffled. The crowd began parting, not in chaos, but with calm reverence, like something sacred was arriving. Jimmy turned, puzzled. Footsteps approached through the red dust, slow, steady, deliberate. A ripple moved through the people, not of fear, but of deep respect. And in that moment, Jimmy realized he wasn't the center of this story anymore. Someone else was about to walk in, someone who would challenge everything he thought he knew. Then Jimmy saw him. Ibrahim Traoré moved through the crowd with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged. Not because of power or title, but because the people around him knew him, trusted him, loved him. He wasn't flanked by guards. He didn't arrive in a motorcade. And there was nothing performative about the way he walked, slowly, deliberately, acknowledging each person with a nod, a touch on the shoulder, a word in passing. This wasn't the image Western media was used to broadcasting. No medals, no military uniform, no tailored suits. Instead, he wore a plain white cotton tunic, loose and clean against his deep skin, paired with matching trousers and a pair of old leather sandals, the kind that had seen many roads and many miles, and yet he looked like royalty. There was something about him, something in the way the air seemed to settle as he passed, in how the children's laughter softened and the grown-ups stood a little straighter, not in fear, but in respect, the kind that can't be commanded, only earned. Jimmy, mid-sentence, paused. It wasn't intimidation, it was something else. A realization, slow and quiet, that maybe he wasn't the center of this moment. The crowd parted as Traoré approached. There was no announcement, just presence. "Mr. Donaldson," Traoré said, extending his hand with a smile that touched his eyes. His English was measured, slightly accented, but clear. The kind of clarity that comes not from fluency, but from intention. "Welcome to Burkina Faso. I'm Ibrahim Traoré." Jimmy took his hand. It was rough, calloused, strong, the hand of someone who had worked with it. Not shaken hands for photo ops, but built things. Dug, carried, planted, not the handshake of a man who lived in conference rooms. "President Traoré, it's an honor," Jimmy replied, his media-trained voice instinctively warm, but this time the words carried something more honest. "Thank you for having me. I hope we can really help your people today." Traoré didn't flinch, but something shifted. Not offense, not annoyance, just a brief glimmer in his eyes, like a teacher watching a student almost get the answer right. "The honor is mine, Jimmy. May I call you that?" "Of course." "Then please, call me Ibrahim." He turned slightly, eyes drifting over the convoy of trucks, the crowds, the cameras, all that spectacle. Then back to Jimmy. "I have one request before we begin." "Anything," Jimmy said quickly. "Whatever you need." "Before the ceremony, before the speeches and the filming, would you walk with me? Just a few minutes. There's something I think you should see first." Jimmy hesitated. His mind immediately ran through the schedule, the light, the camera angles, the distribution plan. Every second was budgeted, every scene storyboarded. They had a narrow window to shoot the footage they needed to justify the cost of this entire operation. But there was something in Traoré's tone, a quiet finality, that told him this wasn't really optional. It wasn't a command, but it was an invitation, and to decline it would be unwise. Jimmy nodded. "Of course, lead the way." Traoré turned to the crowd and spoke briefly in Moor, one of the local languages. The reaction was immediate. Heads nodded. People stepped aside, giving them space. Some followed with their eyes, but no one interrupted. As they started down a narrow dirt path that veered away from the main road, Jimmy glanced over his shoulder at the cameras, the trucks, the curated chaos of production behind him. "Should I bring someone to translate?" he asked. Traoré smiled gently. "That won't be necessary." "Why not?" "Because sometimes the most important conversations don't happen in words. They happen in silence, in what we notice." in simply being where we are. So they walked, side by side, in silence. The smells were stronger here, cooking smoke curling from metal pots, spices in the air, the dry tang of red dust, and the green life of hidden gardens. The sounds were different too. No orchestrated noise, no shouted instructions, just life unfolding. A door creaking, a rooster crowing, a lullaby hummed from a nearby porch. He had ridden through this neighborhood before, air-conditioned and behind tinted glass. But now, walking beside the man who led this country, Jimmy realized this wasn't about what he came to give. It was about what he had yet to understand. They walked past small homes with corrugated roofs painted in shades of blue, green, and sun-faded yellow. The walls were alive with geometric patterns, not decorative, but ancestral, carrying echoes of cultures that had shaped this land long before anyone had drawn its borders. Women sat in doorways, rhythmically grinding millet in wooden bowls, their hands moving with generations of memory. The soft percussion of pestle on grain mixed with the sounds of life all around them. Laughter, distant music from a crackling radio, children shouting in a language Jimmy didn't know, but found oddly comforting. "What do you think?" Traoré's voice was calm but curious. Jimmy glanced around, the goats lazily crossing the path, a boy trailing behind them with a stick, and the calm patience of someone who'd done this every morning of his life. He realized how much he'd missed from behind the glass of the truck, the smells, the texture of the dust, the small details of real life happening, not staged, not curated. "Drop your thoughts in the comments below," Jimmy's inner voice joked. But the usual buzz of content creation didn't quite rise. He stayed quiet. "Tell me about your work," Traoré asked as they resumed walking. Jimmy took a breath. He'd been asked that question hundreds of times, but never like this, never in a place that made his rehearsed answers feel hollow. "I guess I've been lucky. Too lucky, maybe. More money than I could ever spend. A platform that reaches millions. And with all that comes a responsibility. I can't just sit on it while there are people without clean water or kids without books or clinics without medicine. So I try to help. And if I do it publicly, maybe it inspires others to help too. That's always been the idea." Traoré nodded gently. "That's admirable." There was no sarcasm in his voice, just genuine warmth. Jimmy felt seen, not as a celebrity, but as a man trying to do some good. "And what do you hope to achieve here, specifically?" the president asked. Jimmy perked up slightly, the concrete details grounding him again. "We've brought in water purification units, enough to give clean water to thousands. Each one can serve about 50 families. We've got solar kits for villages with no electricity, food for malnourished families, medical supplies for understaffed clinics, and school materials for kids who've never had a proper textbook." As he spoke, Jimmy's voice grew more animated, his hands gesturing with the confidence of someone who knew his numbers, his impact, his plan. "We'll document the whole process. Show our audience where the money goes, measure the results, track how many lives are touched. The goal is to create a ripple effect, inspire others to give, to scale the impact." Traoré listened without interrupting. His face gave little away, just the calm attentiveness of someone who had lived through many kinds of promises. They reached a small hill. The city opened up below them, a sweeping view of Ouagadougou glowing in golden light. Clay homes with flat roofs mingled with newer buildings, smoke curling into the morning air from cooking fires, the city waking like a single breathing organism. In the distance, fields stretched toward the horizon, carefully tended green patches in a dry, unrelenting climate. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Traoré said, his voice carrying a quiet pride. Jimmy nodded slowly. "It really is." And he meant it. Seeing it from this angle, not just physically but emotionally, It made sense why people stayed, why they fought for it, built lives here, built families, dreams. Then Traoré turned toward him, his tone shifting. "Jimmy, may I ask something else?" "Of course," Jimmy said, still half absorbed in the view. "In your country, when someone gives you a gift, what's the proper response?" Jimmy blinked. "To say thank you, I guess. To be grateful. To appreciate the generosity." Traoré looked at him, steady now. "And if that person insists on photographing your gratitude? If they film you while you say thank you? If they show your need, your struggle, to millions of strangers so the giver can be praised for their kindness?" The question landed softly and heavily, like dust settling on a lens. Jimmy didn't respond right away. He felt something shift inside. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. A quiet discomfort. A crack in the frame he'd always looked through. "I think I see what you're getting at," he said finally. His voice was lower now, slower, less polished. And for the first time that morning, Jimmy Donaldson, the king of YouTube philanthropy, didn't have a ready answer. "Do you?" Traoré's voice was soft, not accusatory, not confrontational. It was the voice of someone genuinely curious, someone planting a seed. "I'm not sure you do yet," he added with a gentle smile. "But perhaps you will." They continued down the narrow path, the city thickening around them. The homes here stood closer together, the streets tighter, the soundscape richer, laughter, shouting, conversation, the clatter of pans, music playing somewhere in the distance. And for the first time since Jimmy had landed in Burkina Faso, he really saw the people around him, not as content, not as background, not as grateful recipients to be featured in thumbnails, but as individuals living full, textured lives. A woman sat on a low stool, braiding her daughter's hair. Her fingers moved with effortless grace, weaving strands into intricate patterns as the girl sat quietly, occasionally reaching up to touch her scalp and smile. They both looked up when they noticed Traoré. The woman beamed and called out something in Moor that made the president laugh aloud. He waved, responding warmly, not like a dignitary passing through, but like an old friend being welcomed home. An old man sat beneath a tree nearby, fixing a bicycle wheel with handmade tools. He offered Traoré a respectful nod and then returned to his task, focused and precise, like someone who took pride in getting things right. A group of teenagers had cleared a small open space between buildings for football. Stones marked the corners of their pitch, and their goalposts were built from sticks tied with rope. The ball, a bundle of plastic bags wrapped tightly in string, was kicked with the kind of speed and skill you'd expect to see in a stadium. Traoré followed Jimmy's gaze as one of the players executed a brilliant pass. "These people," he said softly, "have been receiving help from the outside world for decades. Governments, NGOs, celebrities, missionaries, philanthropists. Many come with good hearts, and yes, we are grateful. Deeply." Jimmy nodded. "That's a good thing, right?" Traoré looked at him, not with disapproval, with complexity. Yes, and no. He stopped briefly by a small shop where a woman was carefully arranging tomatoes, onions, and peppers in precise little pyramids. Each display was crafted like art. Traoré greeted her, bought a small bag of tomatoes, and exchanged a few cheerful words that made her laugh and touch his arm before moving on to the next customer. Then he turned back to Jimmy. "Have you ever thought about how the way we help others affects their dignity?" Let us know in the comments below, Jimmy thought instinctively. But no caption or hashtag could carry the weight of that question. Traoré kept walking, the bag of tomatoes swinging gently in his hand. "There's something else that happens," he said. "When help always comes from the outside, when it always arrives with cameras, when it carries the silent assumption that we cannot solve our own problems." "What happens?" Jimmy asked, already sensing the answer. We begin to see ourselves through the eyes of the helper, through your eyes, and slowly, quietly, we begin to believe those eyes are right, that we are broken, that we are weak, that our greatest value lies not in what we can build, but in how pitiful we look while being rescued. Jimmy didn't respond. Not right away. They were now walking through a market area filled with stalls selling everything from fabric and phone chargers to handmade remedies and carved wooden tools. Everywhere he looked, there was ingenuity, people adapting, creating, surviving, not waiting, building. "I never thought about it that way," Jimmy finally said. His voice was quieter now, less practiced, less sure. "Don't," Traoré said, no bitterness in his tone, only clarity. "And I don't blame them. The impulse to help, to give, to relieve suffering, that is a beautiful thing. But Jimmy," he paused. "Sometimes the how matters just as much as the what." They entered a shared courtyard where a few families were gathered. Children played a game involving chalk lines drawn on the packed earth. Their feet moved fast, jumping in and out of the shapes with remarkable rhythm and skill. Jimmy couldn't follow the rules, but he could feel the joy. He smiled, not for the camera, not for the audience, just because their laughter made him feel lighter. "These children," Traoré said, watching them with affection, "they are brilliant. They learn fast. They dream big. They take care of one another. They solve problems with what little they have. They are not victims. They are not helpless. They are not waiting for someone to come save them. They are simply human beings, living in a place where certain things are harder to come by." Just then, a small boy, maybe 8 years old, approached them with the wide-eyed boldness of a child who hasn't yet learned to be shy. He was holding something in his hands, wrapped carefully in cloth. As he got closer, he unwrapped it, a hand-carved wooden lion, small enough to fit in one palm, but detailed and lifelike. The grain of the wood shaped into fur, the eyes full of character. Jimmy bent down to look at it. It was beautiful, crafted not as a toy but as a piece of art. The boy approached with a mix of shyness and pride, cautious, but not afraid. His steps were measured, his grip firm around the carved figure in his hands. And when he reached Traoré, he lifted the lion up and began pointing to the details, explaining his work with the confidence of a true craftsman. "This is Kofi," Traoré translated for Jimmy, kneeling to the boy's level, his voice filled with warmth. "He carved this lion himself, worked on it every day after school for 2 weeks. He's telling me how he shaped the mane, how careful he had to be with the legs so they wouldn't break, and how he used different tools for each part. He says he wants to be an engineer one day, to build bridges and buildings for his community." Jimmy knelt beside them, studying the carving closely. The craftsmanship was striking. Clean lines, thoughtful curves, balanced proportions. The mane was delicately detailed, the stance of the lion strong yet graceful. There was care in every inch of it, the kind of work you don't rush. "This is amazing," Jimmy said quietly. He wasn't sure if Kofi understood his words, but it didn't matter. The tone, the eye contact, those things translated across languages. Kofi beamed with pride. "His father is a carpenter," Traoré continued, watching the boy demonstrate how he had joined the lion's tail to the body with a seamless wooden joint. "He's been teaching Kofi the traditional techniques passed down through generations, but he also encourages him to dream bigger. He tells him his hands can build more than furniture. They can build a future." "And his mother?" Jimmy asked, genuinely curious now. "A school teacher," Traoré smiled. "She makes sure he finishes his homework before he touches his tools. And she's been teaching him English. Says it will help him navigate the wider world when the time comes. They don't have much, but they believe in him. They give him everything they can, not just in resources, but in direction." Kofi finished his explanation and looked up at Jimmy, then held out the lion with both hands, offering it to him. Jimmy hesitated, glancing at Traoré for guidance. "He wants you to have it," Traoré said softly. "In our culture, when we welcome someone into our home, and this neighborhood is his home, we offer something of ourselves. It's how we show respect and friendship." Jimmy took the carving, careful not to drop it. It was heavier than it looked, warm from Kofi's hands, its surface worn smooth by hours of sanding. He looked at the boy, really looked at him. A child with no expensive toys, no digital distractions, no safety net of wealth, just a pair of hands, a vision, and two parents who believed in him. And still, he was offering something precious, a gift not bought but made. "Thank you," Jimmy said, his voice thick. This is beautiful. I can see how much time and care you put into it. I'll treasure it." Kofi grinned, then said something in Moor that made Traoré chuckle. "He says he hopes the lion brings you good luck," Traoré translated, "and that maybe when he's an engineer he'll build something for you one day." The boy turned and sprinted back to the other kids, diving back into their chalk-line game as if nothing unusual had just happened. But Jimmy couldn't stop staring at the lion in his hands. "Jimmy," Traoré said gently, rising to his feet and brushing off his knees, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think before answering." "Okay," Jimmy said, still crouched, still holding the carved lion. "When you look at Kofi, what do you see?" Jimmy thought for a moment, watching the boy play with his friends. "I see a smart, talented kid. Creative, generous, hardworking. A boy with a future, not just because he has dreams, but because he has a family that's helping him chase them. I see someone with potential. Someone who, if given the chance, could do incredible things." Traoré nodded. "Yes, that's exactly right." Then his expression changed, not unkind but more serious. "And when you arrived this morning, with your trucks, your crew, your cameras, when you looked at the crowd gathered to meet you, what did you see?" Jimmy blinked. The answer hit him before he could speak. A silence fell over him, heavier than the one they'd shared earlier. He didn't want to say it, but he knew the truth. "I saw a crowd, an audience, a group of people to help, a set of needs to meet. Metrics, impact numbers, villages to serve, families to feed, a video to make. I saw the before in a before and after story." He paused, then whispered, "I didn't see Kofi." Traoré didn't speak. He let the weight of that realization settle on its own. Jimmy continued, his voice softer now. "I didn't see the woman braiding her daughter's hair, or the man fixing the bicycle, or the teens playing football with their plastic bag ball. I saw need, but not people." He looked down at the lion again. It looked different now. Not just a carving, but a mirror. "I think I'm starting to understand," Jimmy said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I hope so," Traoré replied, his tone soft yet serious. "Because understanding is the beginning of a different kind of help, the kind that empowers instead of sustains dependency, the kind that sees dignity even where resources are lacking, the kind that doesn't see Kofi as a beneficiary, but as a partner, a builder, a future engineer, a young man shaping his own story." They walked on through the rising heat of the afternoon, past homes where generations lived together, past small roadside businesses with hand-painted signs, past a community clinic where a doctor saw patients beneath a tree because there wasn't enough space inside, past a school where children sat on benches under open sky, their voices rising in unison as they recited their lessons. But this time, Jimmy didn't just see need, he saw creativity. Solutions, strength, a network of human resilience operating entirely outside the lens of his camera. "You know," Traoré said after a moment, stopping near a group of women preparing food for what looked like a neighborhood gathering, "in our local languages, Burkina Faso means the land of upright people. Upright not because we think we're better than others, but because we believe in standing on our own feet, in facing hardship with dignity, in solving problems together. That's beautiful, Jimmy said, and he meant it. We do have problems, Jimmy, very real ones. Poverty that shortens lives, drought that kills crops and cattle, violence that forces families from their homes, infrastructure that struggles to carry the weight of a growing nation. These aren't abstract, they're personal, they're daily. Traoré's voice deepened, full of gravity now. And we are grateful for help, when it is real, thoughtful, human. The water systems you brought, they'll save lives. The medicine, it will ease suffering. The books, they will open minds. These are not small things. But, Jimmy asked quietly, sensing it. But we are not defined by our problems, Traoré said. We are defined by how we meet them, by people like Kofi, who carves lions with his hands and dreams of bridges, by teachers who inspire students with no supplies, by mothers who raise children with unshakable hope, by doctors who save lives under trees. That's who we are. They'd looped back toward the main road. The convoy of white trucks was now framed by a swelling crowd. Excitement buzzed in the air like static before a storm. Jimmy could see his crew, setting up lights, adjusting mics, checking batteries. The machine was ready to roll, but something in Jimmy turned over, unsettled. The same sight that once thrilled him now made his stomach twist. This hits different now, doesn't it? What would you do if you were in Jimmy's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Just before they re-entered the spotlight, Traoré paused and looked at him. I think I've been doing this all wrong, Jimmy admitted, the words heavy, real. Not wrong, Traoré said gently, touching his shoulder. Just incomplete. Your heart is good, your intent is sincere, and the impact real. But there's another layer to helping, one that honors people's agency, not just their need. Jimmy nodded slowly. How? I mean, practically, how do I do that? Ask instead of assume, Traoré said. Partner instead of perform. Share the spotlight instead of taking it. Measure success not by how much you gave, but by how much people can now build for themselves. And tell stories where they are the heroes. Not the grateful faces behind your generosity, but the strong, resourceful people they already are. Jimmy looked down. And the cameras? The content? That's how I fund the next mission. My audience expects... Traoré smiled, and for a moment Jimmy saw not just a leader, but a strategist. Then tell different stories, he said. Show not what you gave, but what they achieved with a little help. Show the brilliance, not the brokenness. Show the future being built, not the past being rescued. The crowd came into full view. Singing, clapping, children chanting his name, MrBeast, MrBeast. Jimmy waved. He smiled, but something had shifted, because now he didn't hear praise. He heard welcome. He didn't see a stage. He saw a community. He didn't feel like a savior. He felt like a guest. And he understood for the first time that being invited in meant more than just arriving. It meant listening. It meant respecting. It meant reframing the story. Traoré stepped forward and addressed the crowd, his voice rising above the hum of conversation. A hush fell across the gathering. Children leaned forward, adults nodded slowly, and Jimmy noticed something striking. This wasn't the kind of silence born from obligation. It was the quiet of genuine attention, respect. When he finished speaking, Traoré turned back to Jimmy with a smile that said more than words ever could. Warmth, challenge, encouragement, and perhaps even pride. I told them you've brought valuable gifts, tools that will help this community. But more importantly, I told them you came here to listen, to learn. He paused. I explained that this won't be a ceremony where you give and they receive. Instead, we're going to have a celebration. One where everyone brings something to share. Skills, stories, music, hospitality. That's how we do things here, as one community. Jimmy blinked. And they're okay with that? Traoré laughed, his eyes twinkling. They're excited about it. What followed was unlike anything Jimmy had experienced in all his years of doing philanthropic work. There was no formal ceremony, no stage, no scripted distribution of supplies while cameras panned over thankful faces. Instead, the afternoon blossomed into something real, spontaneous, joyful, and deeply human. Local musicians emerged, carrying drums, flutes, and string instruments Jimmy had never seen. The rhythms they played were infectious, alive, impossible not to move to. The supplies Jimmy had brought were quietly handed over. Not by him, but by respected community leaders who knew exactly who needed what and where it would do the most good. Children invited the camera crew to play their favorite chalk line jumping game, dissolving everyone into laughter as grown adults failed hilariously under the instruction of 8-year-olds. Women showed how they prepared traditional meals, letting Jimmy and his team chop, stir, and taste, while sharing the cultural meaning behind each ingredient. The scent of spice and smoke filled the air. Craftsmen explained their trades, a carpenter who mentored Kofi, a blacksmith turning scrap into sleek tools, a weaver whose fabrics carried the stories of generations. Farmers spoke of drought-resistant techniques passed down over centuries, planting cycles, soil renewal, water retention methods all rooted in ancestral wisdom. Jimmy listened, really listened, and he began asking deeper questions. How? Why? What if? His cameras were still rolling, but this time they weren't capturing a savior. They were documenting something far richer, a cultural exchange, a partnership, a shared moment of dignity and discovery. "This is incredible," Marcus whispered as they watched a group of teenagers perform a traditional dance while explaining its origins. "Honestly, this is some of the best, most meaningful footage we've ever filmed. People are going to feel this." And Jimmy realized Marcus was right. But not just because the footage was compelling. It was because the story was different. For the first time, it wasn't his story. It was theirs. Throughout the celebration, conversations emerged that quietly reshaped everything Jimmy thought he knew about helping others. A local doctor explained how foreign medical donations were most effective when they supported, not replaced, traditional healing practices. A teacher shared how textbooks were most powerful when written in native languages and built around local context, not simply translated versions of Western materials. Later, an engineer approached Jimmy, one who had studied in France and returned home to help modernize rural infrastructure. "The water purification systems you brought," the engineer said, "they're excellent. But what makes them transformative isn't just the tech, it's the training. We're teaching local technicians to maintain and repair them. That's what sustains impact." Jimmy nodded, intrigued. "How long does that take?" 6 months for maintenance, 18 for full repair training. We've already selected candidates from each village, including Kofi's older brother, who's got a sharp mind for mechanics and a natural way with people. "So the systems provide clean water and create jobs?" "Exactly. We don't just install equipment, we invest in people. That's how you build resilience, not dependency." That idea echoed everywhere Jimmy turned. In every corner of the celebration, he found people not just surviving, but innovating, building, teaching, solving problems with pride and precision. It hit him with a quiet, humbling clarity. The people he came to help were already helping themselves. And his role? It wasn't to rescue. It was to listen, to amplify, to respect. He glanced down at the wooden lion Kofi had carved, the careful detail, the delicate proportions, the strength in its eyes. This was the real gift. Not the supplies, not the spotlight, but the chance to see what he'd never seen before. A community not in need of saving, but in need of being seen.